What's going on, everybody? Back out here at the 03 Club Car DS. Today we're going to be replacing the carburetor that was on it when I got it with one from Buggies Unlimited. So I'll show all that here in just a little bit. But for starters, the first thing we're going to do is clean all this off, because I don't want to take anything off involving the intake where dirt could possibly get where it's not supposed to be and get into the motor. So from what I've seen, it doesn't look like it's going to be too terribly hard of a job. However, I'm making this video specifically because I don't see a whole lot of videos available on how to remove and replace a carburetor. There's some that show kind of how to do it indirectly in other videos of golf carts and other golf course maintenance equipment that use this motor. This is the Kawasaki FE290 engine. So we're gonna go ahead, I'll go over the parts with you guys, show you the tools that we're gonna bring out, and we'll get started on this. Here's a quick look at the parts for this job. We'll start with the carburetor. This carburetor was about 60 bucks from Buggies Unlimited. There were cheaper options on Amazon, but we all know how those kind of aftermarket parts end up playing out in the long run. The carburetor came very well packaged. It came with this one small piece of fuel line, which I did actually get extra fuel line from the local bike shop, as well as new hose clamps to replace the pinch style clamps with these screw style. Not much to the fuel pump. One single unit looks almost identical to the one that's on the cart. This was about $30 from Buggies Unlimited, and the same thing, I went with the more expensive one from Buggies Unlimited, so for the simple fact that this one is made out of metal, where the other ones I've seen on Amazon and eBay were actually plastic. So trying to keep it as close to stock as possible. And then you also I've got extra gaskets here. I won't need all of these, but you got your insulator gasket, intake gasket, and then the other carburetor gaskets. So all together, I think everything came to, it was just over $120 shipped, and it came within 3 days of ordering it. So I was grateful for that. As far as tools go, the ones that are needed for this job are fairly basic. Looks like I'm gonna need to use the open end of a wrench to get the carburetor nuts off, because they are pretty tight up against it. Everything on my cart has been standard sizes, so mine is a 03 Club Car DS, so depending on what you're working on. But as far as this motor goes, everything is so far, or as far as this cart goes anyway, it's been standard. But being it's a Kawasaki engine, it's a possibility that those nuts and bolts might be metric. So pretty basic stuff. You have some cutters to cut a few zip ties, the wrenches, Allen wrenches. I got compressed air, alcohol. I'm gonna spray everything off with compressed air and wipe what I can out. Normally you would use carburetor cleaner, but I don't have any of that right now. A magnetic parts tray, that's very important to keep up with all your little small parts, so you don't have to wait on new screws when you lose them. Screwdrivers, pliers, zip ties, so pretty basic stuff. Alright, so I just got done spraying off the entire intake area and wiping it off, getting any loose dirt and grime off the carburetor so that there's no chance of it getting in the motor. First thing I'm going to do is use the pliers and disconnect the intake hose to the air box, as well as the fuel line. The wrench that you use for the two carburetor nuts, you can see them right there, and there is a 10 millimeter. Before you start this project, make sure that you put a catch pan or a bucket or something underneath the carburetor to keep any gas from spilling out onto the ground. Alright, so I've got the fuel line removed and hung up over on the side so it's not leaking out any residual gas in the line and filter. Got the intake hose of the air box disconnected. Now this here, it is a 3/32 Allen wrench. This is the joy of having a club car apparently that uses a Kawasaki engine, because the engine parts are going to be metric and then the parts that aren't made by Kawasaki appear to be standard. So I'm going to get these removed as the next step. Now for the cable that goes to the carburetor, this Allen screw right here, you have to push it to be able to see it because it's underneath the metal bracket. It's a 7/64 Allen wrench. You got to hold the nut on the bottom and spin that loose, and you'll be able to take the cable off from the carburetor. This is the bolt and nut that come off of the cable going to the carburetor. Just a heads up, if there's any kind of corrosion on yours, I live on a coastal area, so the corrosion is a lot more excessive than somebody who might live inland more. This is going to strip out, so I had a time getting it out. I'm going to replace it with a new one so I don't have to go through this again, or whoever I end up selling it to later on down the road won't ever have to go through this. So I just removed the two 10mm bolts off the intake to two intake nuts, and this piece came off. You have to disconnect the vacuum line off the top of this also. Goes on just like that. It's just a little two bolts that hold it on and a hose clamp to the nipple right there, and now the whole carburetor is loose and it'll slide right off. Alright, so here it is, the removed carburetor. It's got the bracket here that covers where the cable goes on. It just slides on first on the studs before everything, and that's what it looks like with the carburetor removed. I will do a separate video taking this carburetor apart and cleaning it, and I'll do a video on it just to document what exactly is wrong with this carburetor that's causing the issue. I can already see a bunch of gunk on the back side of the carburetor where it goes into the intake, so I'm sure that isn't helping things any. So now we're going to start the installation of the new carburetor. Alright, just a couple tips for you guys. If you plan on leaving this for any extended period of time, make sure you stuff a rag in the intake. You don't want anything getting up inside there as it sits, a critter building a nest in there, who knows. So just make sure that you plug that if you're not going to immediately get it reinstalled. Now, as for preparation for the new carburetor goes, this bracket and that intake manifold piece, or not the intake manifold, the intake hose piece, you want to make sure that the gasket is completely removed. I got lucky on this. The gasket did not stick to the block side. Each gasket from each side of this bracket was stuck to the bracket, so that made things much easier than having to get in there and try and scrape that part of the motor if the gasket had been stuck to it. So I'm going to go ahead and get these cleaned up so that the gasket has a perfectly smooth seal, and we'll go from there. As far as the old carburetor goes, something kind of tip that might be helpful for you guys is before you remove this, when you disconnect after you disconnect the fuel line, go ahead and pull the bowl out of the carburetor to drain out any fuel that's still in it. I failed to do that, and I slid the carburetor off, and when I went to go set it down, gas spilled out like it just did now. So an easy way to avoid that making a mess is just drain the bowl out before you remove the carburetor from the engine. All right, so we got the gasket surfaces of the bracket and the carburetor, or the intake side, cleaned up on both sides. Be sure to pay attention to these gaskets and which way they're oriented. The flat side of the gasket is going to match the flat side at the the bottom of the bracket and the carburetor. So the flat side goes closest to the ground. So the installation is going to go gasket first, then the bracket, then another gasket, and then the carburetor can slide on. Once you slide the carburetor on, you can attach the cable, because if you attach this cable first and then try to slide it on, it's not going to happen. The cable doesn't extend long enough for you to be able to clear the carburetor studs, at least not on my model. Other models may be different, I don't know, but on this model it will not reach. Alright guys, I got the gasket on first, then the bracket, then another gasket, then the carburetor. You have to position the carburetor under this bracket before you slide everything together. Once you slide everything together towards the almost flush to the block, you're able to get your cable to reach. So now I'm gonna, sorry for the cutout guys, my SD card was full. I had to go inside and download it. We started right back where it left off. I got the gasket on, all the gaskets, the bracket, the carburetor slid on, the cable connected. Now I put the last gasket on, this piece with the vacuum hose on it. We're about to tighten the bolts down to the proper torque specifications, and then we'll reattach our intake hose, reattach our fuel line, which I actually have got the new screw clamps, as I was saying earlier. I'm going to put those on and install that. So I'm going to go ahead and get these nuts torqued. Alright, so I got everything put back together. Not sure exactly what these screws were for. I mentioned earlier that they needed to be removed. That was incorrect. They don't really go to anything, so I don't know how, not exactly sure what they're there for. Got everything hooked back up. Got the new fuel pump in over here, new clamps on it. About to take it for a test ride and see how it does. But as far as the installation goes, it's completed at this point. Don't forget to subscribe to see other videos like this. I appreciate everybody for watching.